At the beginning of 2020, relations between China and the U.S. seemed to be okay. This was until the coronavirus hit. Now, with the U.S. blaming China for the spread of COVID-19, both countries have been engaged in constant tit-for-tat, culminating last month with the forced closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston first, and then the U.S. consulate in Chengdu. And the U.S. is about to send a high-ranking official to Taiwan. So what are they trying to tell China? Are both countries really moving toward decoupling? Joining me now to discuss all these issues and more are Yang Xiyu, Senior Fellow of the China Institute of International Studies, and Professor Cheng-Yu from Taipei University. I'll also be joined by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, in the first half, and later on, Makri Madarshahi, former UN Senior Economic Officer. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Wang. Professor Yang, let me go to you first. We know that amid recent tensions, the Chinese defense minister and his U.S. counterpart talked over the phone. First of all, give us your interpretation of the fact that both sides give different accounts of what was talked about.
Well, I think I should say first thing first is these talks, the phone talks at this very critical point is very, very important. That talks showed, although including many differences remain, showed the determination from both sides to make all effort to prevent the escalation of tensions towards confrontation between the two big countries. And also, the two sides really reaffirm, not made, but reaffirm the consensus, say the more dangerous situation, the more needs to maintain the exchanges to build up the management of the mechanism of crisis management. So I think although without concrete fruit, however, these talks and the consensus made by talks showed a very good signal for the very bad shape of bilateral China relations.
So you don't think that this is more symbolic than substantive?
Well, no. I would say on the surface, symbolic more than substantive, because no any substantive agreement. But on the other hand, you need to say just through the phone talks, no substantive agreement can be made. However, the talk itself really show the two sides want to avoid the further escalation, especially from the military to military arena. You know, now many people talk about the so-called Cold War, but more and more people begin to concern about the danger of the so-called hot war, especially in South China Sea. So I think the two chiefs of the military forces had a phone call indicate that the two military forces determined to seek for the other ways to address the differences rather than the confrontation.
Yeah, hopefully there will be a de-escalation of tensions in the military front. On the economic front, Jeffrey, let me go to you. Reports said that the two trade and economic teams from both countries are likely to have a video conference by mid-August to review the progress of Phase 1 U.S.-China trade deal. What do you think about that? Should we read too much into that now that we're 3 months away from U.S. elections? Excuse me.
Well, I think everything needs to be viewed in the context of the U.S. election and also the instability of Donald Trump. So I hope that we can get through this period, which is indeed of rising actions by Trump and rising uncertainty and instability until the November election. Because a lot of what is happening right now is motivated by U.S. domestic politics. And we're a short time before the election. The situation is likely to become even more feverish. There's a lot of anti-China sentiment as part of the politics, the grassroots politics, actually, of the Republican Party in particular, but more generally. And so as the election proceeds, there will be more charges more attacks verbally on China. I don't think there's going to be progress on any front, but I hope that there won't be any exaggeration of responses to what are U.S. domestic political events.
Well, Jeffrey, let's talk about the hot button issue of the day, obviously, that is President Trump's ban on TikTok and also WeChat. The executive order blocked the transactions with TikTok's parent company ByteDance, along with another executive order issued on the same day, pushing the same ban for WeChat and its parent company Tencent, two Chinese tech giants. The ban, according to the executive order, will take effect in 45 days. What do you think this will all mean for the users of WeChat and TikTok? I mean, if you have a phone, iPhone, you're in the U.S. Does it mean that it will be inaccessible for users in America? What does it mean?
I think what it means is that we wait till the November election, and if Trump is defeated, as I personally hope, for the sake of the United States and the world, it won't mean anything. Whereas if Trump is reelected somehow, it probably would mean that we're going to a Cold War and a divided world. And so I think a lot depends on the U.S. politics right now. As you can see, and as you said, this is an executive order. This means it comes out of not a general political process. There's no law. There's no regulation. We have one-person rule right now in the United States under these emergency decrees of Trump. He's a very unstable person and very erratic, and so a lot for us in the United States depends on the elections. Again, I would say don't read too much into anything until the elections, but if somehow Trump stays in power, and he's desperate to do so, it will be bad for U.S.-China relations going forward.
Professor Yang, what do you think? I mean, I get asked this question a lot by my friends in America. Does this president's executive order ban on WeChat only affect existing users, or future users, or will that possibly affect existing users? Meaning, if you have an iPhone in the States, you have WeChat, it will become inaccessible. What's your best guess?
Well, I think, firstly, let me put it by this way. Firstly, from user in the United States relating to the question, that will cause a lot of troubles at the individual level and the national level. The individual level, if you have become a fan of the app, then you will suddenly lose something quite valuable, and you will be upset, you will be, angry, and so on. But at the national level, this case, especially from the United States, this case really opened a very, very dangerous path. Say, any sovereign country can make some kind of executive order to block any app or block any high-tech products in sake of the political purposes.
Yeah.
That will make, just as my American colleague mentioned, that will make the world divided more and more. That will damage all the benefits of the people in the world.
Definitely. I would second that. Professor Cheng from Taipei University, thank you for joining us, first of all. How do you look at this, ban on TikTok and WeChat? What is the way out for Tencent and ByteDance?
I would have to say this is a total violation of the principles of a free market economy. Now, the United States government today is using its administrative power to interfere in a free and, most of all, a most updated information economy. Now, Tencent or TikTok, whatever, these are apps that are used, adopted by consumer choices. In other words, the administration now is trying to use its bureaucratic power to interfere in a consumer's choice. Now, that is totally unimaginable that in any cases. So I would have to say, in previous American administrations, never once a president would have the guts, the audacity to do that. And I have to say that in the end, the economy, the market will give all of us the best answer. That is, the consumer will follow their hearts and they will make their choices. Now, technically, it is possible to hinder or to stop TikTok or the other apps like WeChat from being used in the United States. But in fact, we all know that on the internet, there is no territorial bounds possible. So I would have to say that in the end, the United States administration, especially the Trump administration, will find it futile and useless to do whatever they're trying to do now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the figures, TikTok, 2 billion downloads. I mean, that is no mean feat. Jeffrey, let me go to you. Talking about, the tit-for-tat between China and the U.S., in response to Secretary Pompeo's speech, China's Foreign Minister, State Councilor Wang said China's message regarding the U.S. stance is clear. Let's listen to what he said.
Our message is quite clear. We urge the U.S. to stop acting with arrogance and prejudice, but enter into constructive dialogue with us on an equal footing. We hope that it will work with us to ease current tensions and put the relations back onto the right track of no conflict, no confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation.
I mean, Jeffrey, if you could talk to policymakers in Beijing, how should they, go about dealing with this Trump administration right now to really stop this downward spiral in relations?
Well, as I say, I don't think that there is too much to do before the November election, because both Trump as an individual is unstable, and also because he's losing politically right now, and he's lashing out and trying to create more disorder. I think what's important for China is to maintain good relations with the rest of the world, not to be provoked by the United States, because Trump is trying to provoke a deeper crisis. This, I think, is very important. Don't expect reason right now from the U.S. Trump is trying to stir up a deeper crisis. So I would be patient, take a deep breath, and especially work on good relations with the rest of the world. And then the U.S. political process will take place. Right now, the opinion polls put Vice President Biden ahead of Trump rather significantly, because we have an economic and pandemic disaster in the United States. And if there is a change of government, I'm very confident there will be an improvement of rationality and relations in general. If Trump somehow stays in power, I fear that we're going to have a real crisis. And then my view is that China's best response in any event is good relations with other countries, and not to exaggerate the United States' role in things. The U.S. under Trump is aiming for provocation. Please be clear about that.
Well, another potential point of provocation, hot button, issues of hot button issue is, of course, Taiwan. The U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary is expected to arrive with a delegation in Taiwan in the coming days. So let me ask you this, Professor Cheng from Taipei University. Do you think this visit, the first of its kind made by a U.S. cabinet-level secretary in Taiwan since 1979, when Washington shifted diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing, do you think this visit violated the spirit of One China principle?
Oh, absolutely. I have to say that this is a very serious violation of the original mutual understanding and the agreement. Now, let's look back in 1979. Back then, both sides set up the official diplomatic relationship, and the United States agreed to maintain only unofficial relationship with Taiwan. And that United States will not station any military troops in Taiwan. But nowadays, we're looking at the United States pushing step by step forward and trying to make Taiwan a quasi-ally in terms of the military terms, or trying to make Taiwan look as if it's a close partner with the United States. Now, this visit by the Health Secretary, I have to say, this is a carefully crafted political tactics in order to infuriate Beijing or to antagonize the Chinese audience. It wants to encourage Tsai Ing-wen and the DPP administration on Taiwan to take up a more hostile position toward mainland China. Now, why would they do that? Now, on the surface, the Secretary of Health and Human Services said that, well, he's here to promote economic and public health cooperation between the United States and Taiwan. But we're very curious. When you have such an outbreak, a serious pandemic disaster on your hand in the United States, how can you spare the time, the energy, and such a large delegation of health officials to come over to Taiwan
or find a
and
flight
just
to fly over to
honor
Taiwan.
Taiwan for Taiwan's achievement in Taiwan's achievement in fighting coronavirus, COVID-19? This is ridiculous. Obviously, this is a political move trying to make Beijing feel uncomfortable or unhappy, and by doing so, creating more tensions. We have to say this is part of the campaign strategy from the Trump administration again, because he's trailing behind Joseph Biden, obviously, and maybe he hopes, or his advisors would hope, that Beijing will strongly retaliate or rebound to make the situation worse. Now, on the other hand, I have to say that this is a very wrong message to be sent over here in Taiwan, because some of the radical elements inside DPP or the Taiwan independence, pro-independence activists, they are emboldened by this visit, and they will argue that, look, the United States stands firmly behind us, so we can fight against mainland China. We can pursue our secessionist or separatist policy line without any fear, without any concern. Now, that could jeopardize seriously the cross-strait relationship, and it could also damage the peace and stability in the region.
Yeah, let me ask our colleague in Beijing, Professor Yang, what do you think? Your thoughts on this visit?
Well, I think this visit has no any relation with business, so-called health or whatever, but political move, as Professor Cheng pointed out. But if you look at the whole course of U.S. policy or U.S. efforts to enhance the relation with Taiwan, they have revealed their purpose of the strategy, say, just encourage the anti-unification forces inside Taiwan to confront against Beijing. And if they are successful, then the confrontation between the two sides across the street will take place. Then imagine what will happen. Conflicts. And the sacrifice will taken by Chinese, not by Americans. If you look at the history of American diplomacy, they are always good at playing and manipulating the contradictions at the among local peoples and cause troubles and conflicts so that they can control the dominance over the complicated situations. So in short, all the efforts encouraging Taiwan towards independence is designed to control the dominance of the situation here and the region as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree. The color revolution in East Europe come to mind, and also the Bay of Pigs against the Castro government. Right. Do we have Mary? All right. I think, you know what, this, of course, visit is much talked about by people on the Chinese mainland. Many young people in China are infuriated about it. What are the people in Taiwan saying about all this, Professor Cheng?
Well, I have to say that for the incumbent administration, Tsai Ing-wen and the DPP people, they're very happy. They're excited, and they think that, wow, this is a huge, significant breakthrough in terms of the Taiwan-U.S. relationship. And they would argue that it's a clear message sent to Beijing and the world that the United States is strongly behind Tsai Ing-wen and her team. And on the other hand, we're also looking at many editorials and opinion pages, commentaries here in Taiwan, warning the Tsai Ing-wen administration that be careful. What the United States are doing now are nothing more than lip service. They're only telling you wonderful words like we have shared belief, we have shared value, that you are a indispensable global leadership in public health, that Taiwan is such and such. But all these bears down to nothing concrete, nothing material. Many people review the past years of interaction between Taiwan and the American government. And they find out, their conclusion is that nothing material comes out of this relationship. United States sold billions of dollars of used, secondhand, outdated arms and weapons to Taiwan. And Taiwan did nothing and the United States did nothing to help Taiwan in terms of international space or international activities. Taiwan couldn't even get into World Health Assembly, WHO. This is very clear. What's ironic about this is that this health secretary was precisely the delegate from the United States to WHO. And during that meeting, he said nothing about Taiwan. And people say he is supporting Taiwan. That's a joke, because obviously the United States government is using Taiwan as a bargaining chip, as a pawn in the game, to infuriate, to antagonize Beijing and mainland China, and nothing more. So people are asking, if our trade dependence on mainland China's market has grown by leaps and bounds, you know, this year, 2020, we are looking at a 46% dependence on mainland China's market. Now, that is a very significant number, and nobody can deny. Yeah, Tsai Ing-wen administration is holding on to Uncle Sam, whereas Taiwan gets only lip service. No wonder Ma Ying-jeou, the former president, once commented. He said, United States' position toward Taiwan is a typical FBI. What is that? Friendly but inconsequential. So in Taiwan, many people, including the media professionals and the academics, they all realize that Taiwan is getting nothing out of this relationship. And this visit probably would be just the same, nothing but lip service.
Professor Yang, do you agree that Taiwan has been used as a pawn?
Yes, I would use the other words, say Taiwan just as a card in the game between Beijing and Washington. On the surface, many people say, oh, there have been triangle relation between Beijing, Washington, and Taipei. But in fact, in nature, there's no triangle relation. Just a bilateral game or bilateral competition between Beijing, competition used by the United States. Say, now we have a strategic competition with China. Okay, in the game of the so-called strategic competition, Taiwan has been regarded a more valuable card than before by the United States. So recently, you can look at the background, the escalation of the tensions between China and the U.S., and then Taiwan issue comes in, not by Taiwan people, but by the United States. So in short, Taiwan as a card, and whenever the two big players need to make compromises at any level, I'm afraid Taiwan will be the sacrificing part. So I think it's a sad story for Taiwan people, for Chinese people, that Taiwan has become a card by a foreign country, no matter it's a strong or weak, become a card for the other country is a really sad story for people across the people from the two sides of the strait.
Yes, it's really unfortunate. Understand that we have Mary Madarshahi, former UN Senior Economic Officer, with us by phone. Mary, so good to have you with us. I mean, give us your thoughts on the current U.S.-China tensions and its impact on technological and scientific innovation, a field you yourself have been very dedicated in doing.
Well, thank you very much for having me in your program, and I'm terribly sorry that your audiences cannot see me. Let me start probably by the bilateral decoupling of the United States and China before we jump into the technological problem, because it was only a few years ago that there were frequent discussion and talk and references to bilateral economic cooperation between the Chinese and American partners. Today, and only a short while later, now we're talking about decoupling. The present administration in the U.S. not only interested in such arrangements, I have a feeling that the anti-Chinese talks are busy to destroy all bridges which link to countries on scientific, technological, economic matters and the rest. Now, the beginning of it, of course, was the trade talk, be it global or bilateral, but this is now being expanded to further lack of dialogue, I should say, or lack of negotiation or conflict, if we can put it that way. And we can refer to, for example, the closure of the consulate in Texas, in Houston, or the recent activities of the United States, as you mentioned, on all facilities, telecommunication facilities, cyber facilities, and all apps and smartphone, etc., which reflects something more than the trade war and immediate economic interest. By the look of it, this latest restriction probably aimed at stopping China from becoming a #1 economy in the world, and to decouple the United States economy from Chinese economy in the hope that Chinese economy will stop growing.
Yeah, Macri, let me ask you this. Are you worried about really the damages the growing frictions are doing to multilateralism and international cooperation? We have about 1 minute left.
Well, of course.
Sorry.
Yes. Of course, this is the most important side effect of all these frictions between the two parties, because by this we will have no more scientific, technological, and economic cooperation, not only between China and the United States, but also with other nations that are ready to go along with this friction. Because it's not only the left and the right in the United States, but also there are other parties and other actors that are left behind in this bilateral relationship that they're feeding this conflict. So naturally, I can see the friction will end up to lack of cooperation on all domains.
All right, Macri Madarshahi, former UN Senior Economic Officer, thank you so much for joining us. I also want to thank Professor Yang Xiyu, Senior Fellow from China Institute for International Studies, our friend in Taipei, Professor Cheng Yuping from Taipei University, and earlier with us, Professor Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University. And that will do it for this edition of Dialogue. I want to thank all our viewers in China and around the world for tuning in. I'm Wang in Beijing.